Okay, Max. Now that we're working on the digital Beki for the region of Redange, what are the potentials that you see in other parts of Luxembourg and maybe Europe for this project?
Well, considering Europe, in some countries there's kind of a trend to introduce local currency, especially when I look to France. It's like every 3 months a new project is born. So I guess the local currencies are becoming a bit more known today. There's also more interest in it because also the Corona crisis has shown that sometimes global supply chains are quite fragile, and people are coming back and try to support local supply chains. So I think local currencies do have a potential in the next future, and it is already the case if I'm looking, for example, to France or Belgium. In Luxembourg, our association has decided that we want to offer a model. So we want to offer other regions to copy the Beki, and of course, the digital version that we have created now is something very concrete that we can offer.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to basically be able to go and see them and say, hey, here's a working project, here's a working app. For the Beki, you've got deals with the banks, with the local banks, and these same banks presumably could also be used in other parts of Luxembourg.
Of course, these are the main Luxembourg banks in sense of that they are represented almost anywhere in Luxembourg. So of course, the models we developed, the way we deal with them can be easily copied in other regions.
Before that, at one stage you mentioned the south of Luxembourg. Is there any particular region where you think there is existing demand for this kind of project?
Yes. We are in contact with the Transition Minute. Maybe you have heard about the transition movement. So there are some groups, local groups of them in Luxembourg as well. And they are focusing on ASH 2022, which would be the cultural capital of Europe. I think that's how we call it. And in this context, they would like to introduce a local currency which would be much larger than ours. In the south of Luxembourg. It's the industrial part of Luxembourg, or at least used to be, and it's the most densely populated part. So it would have a much bigger effect than it has in our region, which is really a small region. We are one of the smallest regional currencies that exist.
Yeah, that's it's the second largest city in Luxembourg, and there's quite a population there. Okay, I didn't know about the European, was it capital of culture, right?
Yes.
Is it Esch or is it Esch with other cities?
I think it's always other cities as well, but
Okay.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay. What about Luxembourg City? Is there any potential there?
I don't know, and I don't really think so, because that wouldn't make too much sense to create a local currency there, because it is the economical center of Luxembourg, and everything goes into Luxembourg City, and we rather need to decentralize the economy of our country. So I don't think it would make a lot of sense.
Okay. I was a bit surprised earlier when you mentioned France having so many projects, because historically Germany was a bit more active with local currencies.
True. True. They were more or less the first, and in Austria as well. And it took quite some time. I think only in 2013 the first local currencies came up in France, and it's only since about 5 years where there has really been a boom in it. Whereas in Germany this was much earlier, and it has consolidated now.
Okay. Which doesn't mean that there's no potential, because if they have started earlier, then maybe the technological solutions aren't modern, and we could probably also try and see if there's something to be done in Germany.
Of course, of course. I mean, in France, they have the advantage that they have passed a law which regulates local currencies. And so this is pretty an advantage to Germany, where politics is more strict towards local currencies than in France. And I mean, they can make sense anywhere, especially in rural areas around the world. And it would be nice to see projects arise in poorer countries. They do exist, and would be nice to implement more of them in such areas. And when we create our digital Beki based on Sikoba, this could be a perfect model for developing countries as well. You would have the advantage of the IOU system, and you would have the advantage of a local currency, which means that we create a chain reaction of local spendings. We create a network of small businesses that cooperates, where one is strengthening another mutually. So these are things that are important anywhere in the world. And so having both of it, having the Sikoba IOU system and the local currency, could really help boost local economies also in developing countries.
Yeah, completely agree. And by the way, something that has come up that we've announced not long ago is this partnership with the Philippines with the Jala ID. There, in addition to these use cases of simply using IOUs or simply starting local currencies, they want to implement community credit. The reason for that being is that there, these small business people, they're living in slums basically, but they have all work. They all have some economic activity. They all have their own micro businesses. Mushin, with whom I spoke not long ago, even told me to us like they've got factories, small informal factories in these slums that produce things. Now they have no access to banking, and they when they need a loan for investment for a baker who wants to buy an oven, they go to the informal lenders, the loan sharks, who charge between 150 and 200% interest per year, extremely high interest rates. And so there we also want to use Sikoba Pay, the app, use Sikoba for communal lending, so this baker doesn't have to borrow from the loan sharks, but can borrow from other Sikoba users at a much, much lower interest rate. But it's still a reasonably high interest rate and for us. But you know, if it's 30% rather than 150 or 200, that's a huge difference. So yeah, that's for information, an additional use case, and that's our idea that Sikoba is not just one thing. It's you can combine use cases, and they can all reinforce each other.
Of course, and this informal market in countries like Africa. I just watched a documentary about Nigeria, and it's based on that. That's the part of the economy that really works and is much better organized than one would think. People picking up
like garbage recycling or
yeah. It's a huge business. In fact, also people that try to go to a bank and they would eventually get a credit, but then they would have to repay it in just 3 months and by 20% interest in 3 months, not in a year, in 3 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, of course, if you just have the community lending it to you, it entirely changes the situation.
But if people in Luxembourg, in Europe, use Sikoba Pay, and the same people in the Philippines or in Africa, that you can imagine doing some lending or guaranteeing some loans or providing liquidity from the rich countries to the poor countries using the same app, right? Once they're on the same system, you can easily do that. You know, you don't need to do bank transfers or money transfers via
you don't have any intermediary parties, so it makes it much more efficient and much cheaper.
Yeah, so you could have people who, for example, in Luxembourg and France, or use some local community and have access to Sikoba Pay, and they would be able to lend money or support a project in a poor country more or less directly, I mean, using the same app. And of course, we need to put in a few of these features, but it's entirely possible. And I think it's also something that can leverage this whole system.
I hope this will work out. I'm really happy about it, and I have no doubt that it's possible. I mean, it will be difficult to find the access to these people, to these informal markets, etc. But it's possible, and the potential is just huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've got something here. I think, even though, as you said, the Beki is such a small local currency, once we get the digital Beki, once we get everything going, and you can then take this as a model, then what you're doing can then be done by many other groups in Europe and in the world. And that's so great. Sometimes you start with very small beginnings, and it expands.
What I really like about this project is that it's really about autonomous development. The way, if you have a look at the way we did financial inclusion, or we're still doing it today, it's about creating dependencies, and I don't like that. I want to see those people, because they are talented. They just need the tools to organize themselves and have a truly autonomous development, which is not controlled by Western states, but they can do it in the way they want it to happen.
We're not coming to people to trying to convince them to do something new or different. You continue doing what you do. With this, you can just do it a bit better. There's a bit more you can do. You can get better, organized, etc. But you're doing it already. Okay, we're not imposing anything, and when necessary, we are ready to adapt our system to local, let's say, customs and features. So we will be adding features as we see the need for them.
I think we will also see new use cases. People will come up with new ideas, and I'm very interested in following this development.
Yeah, and of course for the Beki, we're doing some features that are for the Beki. But then once we do it for you, they can be reused for others. They're not exclusive. None of the features we develop are exclusive for one user. Once it's done, it's for everyone.
Yes.
All right. Great. Well, thanks very much, Max. It was a pleasure as always. And
thank you.
We're really looking forward to launching the digital Beki in a couple of months' time, hopefully, if everything goes well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Take care, Max.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.